Hello, everyone. This is Michael Tabb. We are in June of 2018. I have two classes joining us, which is character creation and development and writing for film and animation, i.e., screenwriting. The first thing we always do and want to do is go over what the assignments are, or what if the students have any questions, and then we'll talk about the assignments for the week in case there's any issues. Hello, those of you who are here live can now see the video feed. Unfortunately, in the video after the fact, when I post this, you will not see the video feed because for some reason GoToTraining does not record the video feed along with the audio. They only can record a picture of my backdrop screen. All right. So the first thing I always do is open the floor up for questions. Does anybody who's here have any questions?
I don't really have any questions in particular. I'm more just I've got my rough draft up for this week's assignment, but it's a definitely kind of a struggle because I noticed I really had to think about a lot more plot points to the story than what I've actually come up with yet. And,
Right.
and so I felt like I was more throwing stuff together, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe when I sit down and really try and write this out, then I can incorporate all these different
When you do a
actions and
longer
stuff,
version, yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah, it writing the script, there are so many steps as you guys are realizing to creating a really quality product when it comes to storytelling. And it can be quite shocking how much work it takes. So that's why we start with characters and figure out what they're going to do and what the outer journey is, because that tells us where our tent pole moments of structure are going to be. Our inciting incident, or i.e., turning points 1 through 5, or what I like to call them escalations. There are 5 major escalations. You plotted that out in the screenwriting class. You plotted that out in week 2. Now that we're in week 3, you're writing the actual script. But there are things that may need to happen between those major turning points. So you got to figure that stuff out. And then, but hopefully not too much for the short film version. You want to add more when you go to actually write the feature film version of what it is you're creating here for this class, because that will require 90 plus pages to 120 pages of material versus in this class we're just doing a 10-page beginning, middle, and end story. And if you have the tenacity and strength of um, of doing the most difficult thing, creating a character arc during that time. Um, Sorry, that was my phone ringing. I turned it off. Okay, so do you have any? Does anybody else have any questions about anything?
It's not so much a question,
Uh-huh.
but like I'm looking at, because I've kind of done like a rough outline so I can see where I'm going to try not to keep it under, but keep what is essential
Right.
so that it's a coherent story.
Yes.
And it's like I'm looking through it, I'm like, okay, it's that what can I show without making it that, dialogue that can kind of pull me through it to keep me within those pages, or that helps to shorten it.
Well, there's 2 things I like to tell people to do, and that is one, in the first draft, don't worry about the page count. The page count maximum is for the final draft at the end of week 4.
Mm-hmm.
So if you run a little bit over the first week in your first draft and your first thing you're turning in, that's okay. I mean, you don't ever. When I write a first draft of a screenplay, the first draft of my last writing job, I did for someone, which I finished about 3 weeks ago. The first draft was 100 and I want to say 40 pages, which is 20 pages over the maximum you really want to do. You don't want in script language. Usually, for some reason, it averages out to 1 minute per page. So you want your scripts to be between 90 to 120 pages. But in a first draft, it's okay to explore and to overwrite. And then when you go back through it as you edit it, you're going to realize the things you don't need. And you'll have these long conversations and you ask yourself, when your script's too long, you'll look at certain scenes and you'll ask yourself this question: could I actually have this scene occur, because it's a visual medium, with no dialogue? Is there a way to say what I need said without it? If not, can I do it in one line? Can I do it in 2 lines? What is the amount I need and want for maximum impact and the most visual I can make this? And so the first draft, you're going to need to write things out and explore and have the characters speak, and you're really getting your hands and your feelers on who these characters are, how they talk, and how they're going to interact together in those relationships and what that means on the page. But don't edit yourself in the first pass. Your first pass job, it's what we call the vomit draft. It's just literally get it out, write it out, let it all go, put it all on the page, and then you can worry about editing it into what it needs to look like as a final presentation piece uh, by the end of the submission process at the end of week 4.
Okay.
Yeah. So don't worry about that stuff yet. Just get the story on. Some students come to me and their first draft is 20 pages. It's literally twice as long as it needs to be. And then they go through and they get it down to 10. There are a bunch of next week. I do recommend you guys all grab and download my cheat sheet for editing tricks, which is in the editing class, the editing lesson for next week, and download that and you use that. And there are so many tricks in there for editing, as for cutting things down, as well as for what you need to work on and how you make things read well, and what you need to cut to get rid of things you don't need, and what shouldn't be in the dialogue, which you should already know mostly from the 7 deadly dialogue sins from the Screenwriter's Bible. There's a lot you'll work on next week for editing the script. And this week, just get it out. It's funny. People say, "How long does it take you to write a script?" And once I start writing, I write a whole feature film screenplay usually in about 2 weeks. You know, because you can crank out 10 pages a day. You really can. If you're not sitting there and stressing over every word, and you have figured out what your structure is and what you're writing. So don't drive yourself nuts about the details yet, but because when you go back through it, you'll be looking for ways to make it better at every single turn. Is there any other questions?
Okay.
Did that answer all the questions?
I know I'm jumping the gun here,
It's okay.
but
That's what I'm here for.
I honestly I can't even begin to wrap my head around how do you take a 120-minute story and tell that same story, meet all the requirements, and actually make it coherent in 10 minutes, and literally 8.5% of the time. Where do you even begin to pare it down like
that? I wish that one of the hard things with working for a private university is that if I put a script of mine on the website,
mm-hmm.
The school owns it.
Right.
So I can't post examples of what I do or what I've done.
Right.
But here's what I say: look at those big moments, and that you can do one of 2 things. One, you try to hit the 3 points, which you can do. It's this person does this, they realize, okay, something, the character has a flaw, you set that up in the first half a page. You really can do that at stage 1. All you're doing is establishing a flaw in a normal situation that they have day to day. Then, at the bottom of page 1, something happens that hits on that flaw and also puts them in a situation where they've got to make a really tough decision. Then by page 2.5, the character does make that decision. They say, you know what, I am going to do this. And it's a very bold move for that person because it's not something they would usually do, and it's life-changing. But then, after they make that decision, in another 2.5 pages, they make that decision, and how you have this happen in the next 2.5 pages, they realize exactly what the stakes are having made that decision. What is the worst thing that could happen, having decided that? I did do an outline of this of Billy the Bully for for the class. The story is of a bully, not the other way, or not of the person. He picks on somebody because he needs lunch money. That's his need. He goes to steal somebody's lunch money, and they get back to him. The geeks, the which I was a geek. I was an overweight geek in school. They bond together, and then they trap the bully, and they convert him into one of them, and in the end, you have him turning into one of them, stopping other bullies, still holding other bullies responsible. So in the middle of the script, they realize, oh my gosh, I could really get beat up, or all these people are going to come and get me, or whatever. And then at turning point 5 or 4 is you realize in the middle, and you 2.5 pages to realize, okay, this could be bad. Because when people decide to do something, they don't realize what's involved and what they could lose. They do that at the midpoint. So that's page 5. You can do that in that amount of time. And then in 2.5 pages, you just told them what could go wrong, and then boom, it does go wrong 2.5 pages later. They've lost it. Holy crud, this is worse than I could have imagined it would be. But then, even though the worst thing happens, the protagonist learns to stand up and face the antagonist anyways, even after they've taken away from them or done to them what they feared. They've survived. And then they face them, and they either win or lose based on whether you want a happy or a sad ending. And then you see how their life has changed because they went on that journey. In the last page, you can do those things. You can make that a short film. The short film I wrote to prove that it could be done is 4.25 pages, and it's a full 3-act story. A guy just experienced the death of his wife, and he's in mourning, and he's isolating himself. He's driving out into the middle of nowhere. His car breaks down. He goes to this bar, which almost looks like a mirage in the middle of a desert, and he meets a girl, and he goes back. He goes back to the hotel with her. That's his big point one decision. Is he going to risk being in a relationship after removing himself entirely from the world, not believing in love anymore? Of course, the midpoint is, it gets physical, and then he realizes that she is also damaged at the midpoint, and she has a history of being badly brutalized. She is scarred. And then at turning point 2, he's alone, and it looks like he's going to end his own life. But in the end, what he's done is he's shaven off this big growth of beard, which is part of his isolation. And he takes her to breakfast. And as they leave, you go back to the place where you see that the woman was dying at the opening, the woman he loves, which sent him into isolation. You cut back to that room, and it's only then that you realize the woman who dies in the bed, who is his wife, is actually the woman you just saw him find. So instead of it being a story about getting over love, it was showing you how before he's gotten over loss and found love again. And this was actually the story of how he fell in love with her before she died.
Right.
Okay.
And I did that in 4.5 pages because it's mostly about visuals. It's not about conversation. The only conversational scenes I had were to establish a verbal repartee between the girl and him. So that it felt like it was genuine, so that these two people did have a connection, and that it did feel honest and real before you take anything to that level. And then after those things have happened, because then he gets intimate with her, and she's all of a sudden she has barriers too, which is how he realizes she comes from abuse, because she doesn't get intimate with somebody with the lights on, because she doesn't want
Mhm.
somebody to see how badly scarred she is. So it's talking about these things that really hurt us and how we feel and what's important to us as human beings, and what I wanted to say about love. And it's very poignant for me right now because I'm personally about to go through a divorce, and I've been married to this woman for over 20 years, and it breaks my heart she's leaving me. And writing about things that are about what you're dealing with and what is important to you and how important it is that love is made real, that you have to keep loving even when love slaps you in the face so hard and you don't know why. And for you, it'll be other things that really mean something to you at any given moment. But if you can always come up with a premise of something that really does mean something to you at any time, you'll never not have a story to tell. And that's the beauty of the process. So I hope, I can do it in 4.5 pages. So hopefully 10 isn't too short after you have a week to write it and a week to edit it. Um, but if you're having problems, uh, just let me know. And there are some extra tips I can maybe throw at you at the last minute if the editing handout, the, the cheat sheet doesn't give you enough to
Mhm.
get the page count down. Any other questions? And it can be about the future. It can be about writing. It can be about anything. Okay. Well, this week, let's talk about the homework assignments. There are two, obviously one for each of your classes. For the character creation and development class, which is something like month 3 in the program, uh,
Mhm.
you are developing. In week 2, you developed a protagonist and an antagonist, figured out their goals and the inner and outer journey of the protagonist. This week, you will be venturing to round out the supporting cast uh, and continue to work on the characters you've already developed that relate back. So the protagonist relates to the premise, and then the antagonist is built off of the outer journey of the protagonist. And now this week you do the love interest, the mentor, and the reflection character slash ally.
Mhm.
And the love interest is going to be based on the concept of the love is the one thing that helps us change. It's the one thing we will change for. So that's why the love interest is so important if you're going to have a character arc. And it doesn't have to be romantic love. It just has to be real love, somebody who you change your life for, whether it's a child, a parent, a sibling. 9 times out of 10, people use romantic love, and that's fine because it's what most people going to movies understand is something real. Kids see it and hopefully have a chance to see that that's a real thing in parents. Otherwise, once kids hit teenagerdom, uh, love is something they grow to realize is really true, and it's the one thing that occupies them. So love is something everybody understands. Um, so the love so you come up with a love interest who inspires the protagonist toward the character arc you are um, you have designed for them to take in the inner journey. And then you have a mentor who's the person who's teaching them how to succeed in the outer journey. And you're listing you list 3 physical actions for each of these characters. And these physical
Mhm.
actions are things that would get somebody to do what they're supposed to do. For the love interest, it's what's going to get the love interest to do what they need to change, how they need to change, and to realize it. Whether it's by being an example, not by killing their relationship that they're not making that change, and walking away from them and breaking it off with them because they're not making that character arc, whatever. Um, because they're not being noble, or because they're not being heroic, or because they're not being courageous, or because they're not being bold. whatever it is you're trying to show that this character needs to be to. And with the mentor, it's a character who is teaching them three separate physical kinds of tasks that will help them overcome and accomplish their outer journey, whether they do or not, whether they accomplish it or not. What would you have somebody do who's trying to teach them to do what they're trying to do? It's not simply advice. Anybody can give advice. Um, and then you have the reflection character and ally, and that character has three things they do that are supporting the protagonist in how they move forward. So they're not teaching the protagonist anything necessarily. I mean, they can give them advice and things like that because anybody can give a character advice. This is about what they physically do in the story that is a visual thing because we are writing for visual mediums. uh, these are physical things these characters do. Like, for example, this guy could take a bullet for this guy, or he can support him in his bid for presidency, or he can become his whatever. You need to figure out three things to do to help keep and inspire the protagonist to continue on his outer journey when the going gets really rough. You know,
Right.
what do real friends do for you? And that's what it is. The ally is the friend, the sidekick, whatever. Uh, and they don't outrank the protagonist. The mentor does, but the reflection character is either on the same level or sometimes even beneath. Like in a military movie, like a protagonist will often be the sergeant or the lieutenant running the platoon. That's usually like a mentor character. And then you have the grunts who are in the platoon or the command that the character is commanding, and you have a protagonist who's say a corporal there, which is a step up from a private, and then the other characters that are in the trenches with him that have the same job as them to take the beach or to do whatever. Those are the allies or reflection characters, protagonist reflection characters, which is separate from a thematic reflection character or premise reflection character.
Right.
Okay. And then so those are the things you're figuring out. What are those characters? What are they going to do in order? How you're just figuring out what do these characters do, all of them together, to help your protagonist achieve. So the premise is the sun. Your protagonist is the earth, and all these other characters are the moons rotating around the earth, getting it to spin on its axis. All right. And that's your job for this week. It's you're flushing out all the rest of the major characters in character class, and then next week you're going to write a scene that is the scene that introduces your protagonist to the story, and give them a great introduction. Uh, then with the other class, writing for film and animation, this week you're writing the very first draft of a complete short screenplay that covers a three-act structure and is a proof of concept for something that you would be interested in expanding into a longer form feature film of 90 to 120 pages. But this is just a 10-page teaser. It gets people interested in your situation and your protagonist and your antagonist. You do not need to have more than those three characters. I do recommend a love interest if you're going to hint at um, the character flaw, at least in which you should in stage one, and you should pay off in stage six how the experience changed them. The love interest is usually a pretty good one to include, but you may not have time for training or anything like that. It may seem more like a self discovery thing, or it may be just a one scene with a mentor who says, "Hey, got to do this." It may do only one of the three things you planned on them doing. And the truth is, when you make these lists of three things for each character to do to help do their job, truth is you should be coming up with like 10 things they can do, and then you pick the best three. You know what I mean? It's like the first week when I have everybody pick out three premise to work on, and then you pick the best one. The idea is you should come up with a bunch of ideas for each thing, and then you pick the best ones to use. It's not just whatever comes to mind. Okay, I guess I'll consider this and that and the other thing, and that'll work. No, no, it's not whatever comes to mind. It's you really think about it. You really give it some deep consideration, and then you keep the best and you cut the rest. It's my favorite phrase. Um, Keep the best and cut the rest. So come up with a lot of great ideas, and then you're like, you know what, that's the most cool, or that's what works the most for, you know, you may have more than 5 great ideas or 3 great ideas, and in a feature film you may use more of them. But even if not, you may realize, you may have more good ideas than you need, and then you decide which ones are best for proving your premise or telling your outer journey, which again proves your premise. So it's all about that. Um, and those are the assignments for this week. It's try to write a short version of your script. And, remember, you only need 3 things in a screenplay, and that is scene headings every time somebody changes a room. Okay? Not just, there's no scene heading for a house. It's if you're in a house, you're in the living room, then you're in the kitchen, then you're in the bedroom, then you're in the hallway, then you're on the stairs. You got to remember to break things up on any interior location. You always have at least you have a micro and a macro location on all interiors. Exteriors, sometimes you don't need it; it's just a park. But you can be doing things like exterior, uh, 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 Main Street, and then something bank. Uh, so if you do that, but or you can just say exterior something bank, uh, and you don't need both things. All right, that's that. So, oh wait, 3 things. So one is the scene heading. 2 is the action. That's the most important thing in these stories, in these scripts, because we're writing for visual mediums in this program: television, film, comic books, animation, all that stuff, games. It's all about watching physical things happen. It's telling a story through visual means. It's not like a stage play where it's really about the dialogue, and it's not a book where it's really about how the brain works and you're reading about things and picturing it in your head. This speaks to the inner monologue. This speaks to the inner dynamics of how a character thinks. That's not how we communicate story in the mediums we teach in this program. Those are different. That's different kind of writing. We're writing about visuals. So cinematic action, things are physically happening. Anything that you want to happen in a scene, think about and ask yourself, is there a way to do it without talking about it? Or if you talk about it, say something that's absolutely not what it is they're trying to do. Show some irony or pathos um, to illustrate character. And then after that, after you write the action, then there's dialogue. That's it. Those are the only 3 things you need. The truth is, you don't even need to have dialogue parentheticals. Those are only there to stop confusion, not to tell story. It's literally okay, so that you're not confused is when you put those in. So if something is just really not clear, like if one character talks, then a second character is not responding to this character, but is talking to a third character. That's when you put this character and you put a parenthetical that says to someone else, because you're saying this person is speaking not to the person who just spoke to them, or not to the last person who spoke, because you don't want the audience to read. Because when you read one line after another, people will automatically assume in reading that one character is speaking to the other, and that character is speaking back to the last person who spoke. So it's just literally parentheticals are only for curtailing confusion for the reader. So that's it. Little dialogue, some action, keep track of where we are, show us the scenes, and then try to keep it on pace. Remember, if you wind up with a shorter script than 10 pages, a lot of students wind up with a 7-page script, which is ideal. The first quarter of the script is Act 1, so you're looking at roughly, instead of 2.5 pages, 2 pages. By the end of page 2, the character makes that decision, and then at the midpoint, when everything goes wrong on a 7-page thing, page 3.5, it's a 7-page script. On page 3.5 is the midpoint realization of exactly what could go wrong, what are the stakes involved, and what's our first indication of that, and how bad does it look, and does our character almost get killed at that point or something if it's life and death stakes. And then, so just remember, 3/4 point is the end of Act 2. And then, roughly page 5, and then you have a climax, and you wrap it up, and that's it. Tell a little story. Tell a little story. Be excited about it. Be happy about it. Explore the characters. It doesn't have to be 10 pages this first week. It does next week. Um, That said, if you find a way to get under 10 pages this week before you even get other stuff going, then that's great too. It's just, you might wind up even making it shorter, which is great. The shorter and more succinct you show people, you can tell a story well, with a beginning, middle, and end. And I mean, don't cut things that are gonna that you need in order to sell the movie to somebody as a great idea. Keep those things, but you can get the story in to the 10 pages. Um, and that's the assignment. Do you guys have any questions on anything so far, or anything I said?
I just want to clarify for my own sake, whatever it is that I'm working on this month, that's not the idea I have to stick with through in future classes, is it?
No, no. This is a one class script. I mean, they may ask to see scenes from it, like if they want to see how you're writing your scenes and how you're editing, they may ask you to pull a scene from something you've already written. But
Right.
no, you whatever you're writing for this class is for this class. Just like the TV show is for the TV class. In the game program, you're going to write things for a game idea, which is not your movie idea. And then in adaptation, they're going to say, hey, take one of these ideas for something that is already out there in the universe and tell your version of it, which also again is none of what you've done before. Also, so you're coming up with at least four totally different story ideas and hooks for different stories in this program, and then after that. There's going to be a portfolio class, which is going to make sure that you have work ready to post and put on your website. And you're going to have a business class. Um, you're going to have and you're going to have a business class at the very end to help you understand what you need to do in order to get your work out there and have a career in this profession.
Right. Okay.
Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Do either of you have any other questions before we end our little session today? I'm 100% here until I've answered everything. I will take
I
them.
don't really have anything right now.
Yeah, I'm all set. I'm sure, as soon as we're done, give
You'll
me
think of
another
something.
45 minutes, I'll come up with something. But as of right
That
now,
always happens.
so,
Okay. Well, maybe you'll bring the question next week.
all right.
All right. All right, you guys, you have a great day. Good luck. Great writing to you. And thank you two for showing up. And have a great rest of your week.
You too.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.